Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Ranger Jen Epstein, and I'm really excited to have you joining us for our sixth session of our Lincoln at 100 teacher workshop series. If you've missed any of them, you can go back and see them on our webpage, on the Trust for the National Mall webpage. I'm here tonight with Erin Plant, who has been awesome about hosting us. The Trust for the National Mall is our partner in this kind of work, and so we're really happy to have been doing this together. And I'm going to throw it to Erin for just a minute to tell you a little bit about what they do.
Great, thanks so much, Jen, and welcome everyone to our final session. So exciting. My name is Erin Plant. I'm a public engagement coordinator with the Trust for the National Mall, which is the primary nonprofit philanthropic partner of the National Park Service here on the National Mall, where our mission is to preserve, restore, and enrich. We're so honored to host Jen and our other Ranger friends to help bring the many stories of the National Mall and the Lincoln Memorial specifically today to all of you and all of your classrooms around the country. Like Jen said, I cannot believe that this is our 6th month of the Lincoln Memorial Teacher Workshops. I just want to give a huge shout out to Jen for leading us through this series, bringing together parks and rangers from all over to show us how much there is to explore in the Lincoln Memorial. So for those of you returning tonight, thanks for being here. It's been so great learning with you throughout this series. I hope you'll keep up the great comments and questions in the chat. If you're new here or if you ever missed a workshop, like Jen said, all of the past sessions are stored in our virtual classroom archive at nationalmall.org under the Explore tab. There's also a virtual classroom that we did in the past dedicated specifically to the Marian Anderson concert at the Lincoln Memorial, if you want to dive deeper into that in that one event, but Jen will give you many more to think about tonight. I'll throw that link in the chat, but I won't give away any more spoilers. So Jen, back to you to get us started. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We wouldn't have been able to do this without your help in organizing and getting us all coordinated here and connected. So thank you guys for your help. It's so weird. I've been talking about this now for probably over a year. Oh, the Lincoln Memorial, it's going to be 100 next year. And now the Lincoln Memorial is going to be 100 next month. Like, how did that happen? We've been talking about this for so long, and here we are. So we wanted to do this. My small but mighty education team wanted to do this as this series of workshops as a way to engage you teachers and your students with this special anniversary. And we really think we have a great story to share. And we wanted to provide opportunities to connect with other elements of the Lincoln Memorial, the history of the Lincoln Memorial. If you haven't joined in our other sessions, I know we've talked about them. They are online. And we began with the really complex history of the dedication in 1922. If you haven't seen that one, please go check it out. Ranger Bethany has been digging deep into the multiple levels of stories related to the dedication. You've heard from other Lincoln sites about memorializing Lincoln, like Ford's Theater, Gettysburg, and the Abraham Lincoln birthplace. And last month, we looked at how geology and history come together at the Lincoln Memorial. Ranger Sonia visited us from Dinosaur National Monument. So tonight, it's about the events that have happened at the Lincoln Memorial. And if this inspires you in any way to want to have a ranger join your class in person, if possible, or virtually, please let us know. We're happy to connect, and we'd be glad to work with you. And what we're hoping is that maybe something sparks an idea for you. I'm going to throw out some things that we've done over the years. Just tell some of the stories of the Lincoln Memorial and things that have happened there. But if there's a great idea you get from something you hear here or something that you already are doing that we could help you with in your class, by all means, get in touch and we'd love to help you out. So we've been saying for a long time, if you've been with us or have talked to us at any moment in time, that the meaning of the Lincoln Memorial has evolved over time. So when we look back at the dedication, which Bethany has been doing a lot of. She's my colleague in this and will probably pop in at some point if she gets off if she gets off the highway tonight. But here's a photo from the dedication day. And the dedication in 1922, May 30, was very much focused on the idea of unity, that President Lincoln was the person who helped to reunite the nation after the Civil War, even though he wasn't really there after the Civil War, but he gets the country back together. So there's all these symbols of unity throughout this memorial. And yet, if we ask students today, what do they know or what do they think about President Lincoln, it's very often this idea of freedom and his role in emancipation. And so how do we get there? How do we go from this really overwhelming sense of unity at the beginning 100 years ago to where we are today? So I put together just a really random compilation of some different events that have happened over the years, starting, of course, here with the dedication. But and we've had this idea. One of my colleagues here has really kind of latched onto the idea of how we see, through the decades, like what was kind of the evolution of the memorial through the decades. So I tried to get something in each decade. I didn't quite, I think, be successful, but we'll see. You let me know how I did here. Here's just a scene from the dedication for those that missed session one. And the big conversation points, as I said, was really about unity. President Harding on the right giving his address, saying that emancipation was just kind of something that happened, but it was really all in the name of unity. And the photo on the left shows Dr. Robert Moton, who is the president of Tuskegee Institute, who was invited because someone said, geez, maybe we should invite an African-American to participate. And Taft, who was a Supreme Court justice at the time, but sort of the head of the Lincoln Memorial Commission, was friendly with him. And, over the course of the correspondence, which we've been looking into a lot lately, Moton submits a speech and Taft says, that's a little bit too long. Air quotes for long, because we don't really think it was too long. We think it was really about what he was saying. And he had some pretty harsh terms. 1922, Washington, D.C. wasn't ready to hear about how we should be moving forward with the civil rights movement yet, when this audience is segregated. And so there's right off the bat, you have this just, really difficult story to deal with, that there's this segregation happening at this event. And so this is how we start our story. And 100 years later, where do we end up? And again, how might you use this in your classrooms? So if there's any thoughts, please, by all means, jump in at any time. I'm totally one who loves to be interrupted. If you want to put stuff in the chat, you can put it in the chat. Or if you want to raise a hand, Erin can unmute you and you can feel free to interrupt me. This is something that we all really got behind when we started thinking about the Lincoln 100. And this is an article from the Chicago Defender that talked about it came out in June of 1922, just, a little bit after the dedication, or in this case, they said, opened but not dedicated stands memorial to Lincoln. When your audience is segregated and people aren't free to come and go and sit where they want, how on earth can you say that this memorial has been dedicated? And so this is an article that we've all kind of followed, and we've thought, as we get ready to celebrate 100 years of this memorial, this is really something that we could think about. And this I'm trying to move my little bar around. Here we go. With song prayer, I'm looking at the very last paragraph here. I don't know if y'all can see, but with song prayer, bold and truthful speech, with faith in God and country, later on, let us dedicate the temple thus far only opened. And so we really were struck by this. And as we were thinking about ideas for the 100th anniversary of this memorial, the idea that it maybe hasn't officially been dedicated, and maybe now is the time 100 years later. So that's been something we've all kind of thought about as we work towards this anniversary, which is literally around the corner now. So for 1920s, boy, it was hard to find some stuff from the 1920s. There was, though, an instance in 1926 where there is a church gathering, and they think it's considered to be one of the earliest gatherings for a mass religious service. It was August of 1926. could not find very much information about it. The main speaker was the Bishop of African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and he told his audience of 2,000 that the immortality of the great emancipator lay not in his preservation of the Union, but in his giving freedom to the Negroes of America. So already we're contradicting this idea that had been put out there in 1922 when it opened, that this was really not about unity, but about freedom. And so these are just some shots of that era, 1920. I don't know about that picture on the right, 1920 to 1950. I don't know how you could not narrow that down just a little bit. But there you have it. I need little reminders, so I put things in here to remind me. So if anybody's talked to me at all before, you've probably heard me talk about this story, because this is one of my favorites, as Erin hinted at. 1939, Easter Sunday. This is Miss Marian Anderson, and she comes to Washington to perform. Very famous singer. I love sharing this story with young people, and there's some great children's books out there that really help tell the story. There's a book called When Marian Sang, really beautiful book to tell the story. And then there's one for young adults called The Voice That Challenged a Nation. So there's some great ways to incorporate her story into your language arts curriculum and history if you wanted to. So Marian Anderson wants to come to Washington and perform. And the best building in town, the Constitution Hall, owned by the Daughters of the American Revolution, is unavailable every date that her manager asks. Turns out, of course, they have a policy that says African Americans can't perform in this building. Yay, Ranger Bethany's here. This fella down front, Harold Ickes, he's our Secretary of the Interior at the time, and he works. You often hear Eleanor Roosevelt mentioned involved in this story, and she has a role. I don't know how involved she is in actually organizing the concert at the Lincoln Memorial, but she makes this front page news when she decides to quit from the Daughters of the American Revolution. And so that puts it in the forefront. And they're considering options for Miss Marian to perform. Someone says, how about outside? And then they say, oh, here's the perfect place. Let's have her at the steps of Lincoln, right? Here's this African-American singer who's been denied the chance to perform in a building. We need to have her here at the feet of the great emancipator. And so that's been talked about, and they arranged to make that happen. And yeah, so here it is, Easter Sunday. It was cold that day. I don't know, these people don't look very happy in this picture. Miss Marian's wearing a heavy coat. Here's the crowd though, 75,000 people come out to see this. And it's really, yes, maybe 1926 saw a gathering of 2,000 people, but this is big, because now you have people, all races, doesn't matter what you look like, who have come out to be a part of this and get to hear this woman sing. 75,000 people. That's a lot more, way more than you would have had in any of the auditoriums in town. So this becomes a big deal. And Miss Marian lived to be in her early 90s. She died in like 1993, I think. And so she had time to reflect back on this. And she wrote an autobiography, although they think maybe she had a ghostwriter who did more of it than she did. But she said when she talks about this, she says, I looked out at this crowd and I thought when I opened my mouth that nothing was going to come out, because she just didn't think she would be able to sing in front of all of these people. Anyway, it's a great story. I was so surprised when the African American History and Culture Museum opened years ago here in Washington, D.C., to find out that they had Miss Marian's dress from the day of the concert. Obviously, it's a black and white photo, so I can't really tell what she's wearing underneath. And she's wearing this coat because it's cold out. But to see this dress, I spent time. If you're in the Washington area, you can go to the African American History and Culture Museum, and on the floor with all the music, this is where the dress is. And I think people were all around me taking in all the sounds and the music. And I just stood and stared at this dress and took like a zillion pictures and was all excited. So check that out if you haven't had a chance to do that when you're in Washington. And if you want to hear more about this story, I'm always happy to share. We've also tried during this session these sessions to really focus on primary sources. We know that's something that teachers are using And this story provides a great one. As I mentioned, Eleanor Roosevelt had met Marian. She had invited her. Marian Anderson had sung at the White House for the Roosevelts before. And so what ends up kind of causing this to be a stir, and actually, I think Marian's manager wanted something to cause a stir. Like it was kind of fading into the woodwork, like nobody really cared that no one was letting her perform in Washington, D.C. And then Eleanor Roosevelt goes and resigns. And she has this newspaper column, her My Day column, where she poses this question as part of our program for the kids we did. We asked them to think about this. She poses this question about whether do you stay in an organization when you disagree with them because you think you're going to be able to change it from the inside, or are you just so disgusted that you decide to go out? And so Eleanor poses this in her My Day column, and she doesn't yet really describe what the situation is at first, but then she comes back and she says, yeah, no, I can't do it. I'm out. So I love this letter. I mean, part of it I think is because I just love the whole typewriter and the, edits and things. And she says, I'm afraid that I've never been a very useful member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, so I know it will make very little difference to you whether I resign or whether I continue to be a member of your organization. However, I am in complete disagreement with the attitude taken in refusing Constitution Hall to a great artist. You have set an example which seems to me unfortunate, and I feel obliged to send into you my resignation. This one gets me every time. You had an opportunity to lead in an enlightened way, and it seems to me that your organization has failed. Imagine getting that from the First Lady. So this is what puts this story, kind of front and center again. And one of my favorite things that I found when I was preparing that last program was this line. Harold Ickes decides to go and ask FDR, hey, are you okay with her performing at the Lincoln Memorial? And is that okay? Because Ickes he reports to FDR, so he's checking in with the boss. And FDR is at this point sick and tired of this story and wants it to go away. FDR has to worry about his Southern congressmen and things not wanting to get involved in the race issue too much. He's afraid he's going to lose votes from the Southerners in the Congress. And so he wants this to go away, and he wants Eleanor's name not to be connected to it anymore. And so when Ickes says to FDR, who's in a real hurry, he's going somewhere, and he asks, is it okay that Marian Anderson sings at the Lincoln Memorial? FDR apparently responded with, she can sing at the top of the Washington Monument if she wants to. He just wants this to go away. And so that always just really makes me laugh. So one of the ways that we've been able to incorporate this story into some of our programming, and something maybe if you're nearby and able to join us for someday or visiting, we've had students come and sing on the steps. And this was a local Washington, D.C. class that came out a few years ago. And they had, I think, done My Country 'Tis of Thee, which is the song that Miss Marian sang first up in her show. And so these were, I don't know, 4th and 5th graders perhaps, and they're standing on the steps and they gave a performance for us. And we've had a number of classes do that. One of the things that I also got to do, which was really neat, was back for the 80th anniversary, 2019. Math is not my strong suit, I think. This was also a DC class. I'm giving them a little presentation here about Miss Marian. We are on the stage at Constitution Hall, and this has been something that's been really interesting. I've been on the National Mall over 20 years. And when I first reached out to the daughters to talk about this, it was just getting to the point where they were willing to be sort of receptive. And when we did our 75th anniversary program, they were there to be at the Lincoln Memorial with us, and have, I think, came to me and said, hey, would you like to do something for the 80th? And so we were able to bring, these local students. These were little guys, 1st and 2nd graders, and they sang My Country 'Tis of Thee on the stage at Constitution Hall. And that was quite a moment. So that was for the 80th. So I can't play it, but y'all, if you want to check it out, you can go to the DAR page and put in the 80th anniversary and check out these guys. They were adorable. And so just things we could do to try to connect the story and try it and, get students involved. And I can't imagine, maybe Constitution Hall wouldn't have been that big a deal, but I can't imagine a little guy forget something like that when you went to this big fancy building and you got to sing on this stage. hopefully that's something that sticks with them. Okay, so we got through the 20s and the 30s. In 1941, this fellow on the left, this is A. Philip Randolph. He's going to propose a march on Washington. And as I said, FDR, excuse me, doesn't want to hear that. Sorry, my throat's going to give out here. So he meets with A. Philip Randolph and he says, look, dude, we can't do with this. This big march, bringing all these people to Washington, calling attention. I think he was concerned that there weren't jobs for folks in the war industries, and he was really upset about that. And at the very last minute, he manages to work out a compromise, and FDR passes something that allows for African Americans to go work and help the war effort. Excuse me. And there's a picture with Eleanor, but what really surprised me about all of this was that my pal Harold Ickes expressed a bit of a bit of concern about all of this, and he says, so here's A. Philip Randolph in 1941. FDR convinces him to put his plans for a march on hold, and he decides to apply again another year, the next year, and his permit was denied. FDR and Harold Ickes are worried that the memorial is going to become this place where these kind of marches happen. And he says, Ickes confided to his diary, if we allow one controversial subject to be discussed at the memorial, it would be difficult for us to deny its use on other similar occasions. Ickes wrote Randolph and explained that a protest would dim the glory of Anderson's historic concert, adding, I do not believe that even such a meeting as you propose would be in the true spirit of the Lincoln Memorial. And when you consider that while A. Philip Randolph doesn't get this memorial to happen in 1941, we'll see here in just a second that it does come about in 1963. And so I just was fascinated by this idea that in the 1940s, here's Harold Ickes, who, if you're very interested in the Marian Anderson concert story, there's great video of Harold Ickes introducing Marian Anderson. And there's this beautiful speech he gives, and it's very short, but beautiful speech about how, God gave us, the blue skies, and I'm paraphrasing it very badly, but this idea that we have this opportunity to be free, and she has this opportunity to sing, and that here under this stage is where it's just amazing that to hear Harold Ickes talk about this just a few years after he had how that all comes about is just really fascinating. And I've learned a lot about some of these events that I wasn't quite aware of myself. So 1947, we find that the 38th meeting of the NAACP is going to end up here at the Lincoln Memorial, and that would be President Harry Truman. We also find our friend Miss Eleanor Roosevelt here, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, and I really wanted to I'm sure not gracefully, share with you just a smidgen. Let me try this, see what happens. What did I do? Am I still with you? Yes. Oh. I'm not very good at this. Here it is. Let's try it.
In a Lincoln's Day address to a gathering of 10,000 before the memorial to the great emancipator in Washington, President Truman strongly advocates freedom and equality for all United States citizens.
Recent events in the United States and abroad have made us realize that it is more important today than ever before to ensure that all Americans enjoy these rights. When I say all Americans, I mean all Americans. Our immediate task is to remove the last remnants of the barriers which stand between millions of our citizens and their birthright. There is no justifiable reason for discrimination because of ancestry or religion or race or color.
Okay, now how do I get out? Ah. Okay. Am I still here? Yes, good. Okay, so yes, I loved that video. I thought that was really fun. And I loved his line, which is really, again, reinforcing this idea of what this is all about now. When he's talking about Americans, he's talking about all Americans. And so this is 1947. I tried to find out a little bit more about why they were meeting here. And I struggled with that, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The Truman Library is a fantastic resource, and even know some of the education people there. So I totally, if you're interested in using these kind of videos and things, there's some amazing resources historically for us out there. But yeah, Truman out there in 47. How about it? There's the video. So here's another story I tell way too often, I'm sure, but as teachers, oh, are you not seeing any of this?
Sorry, Jen, you just need to reshare to get back to the PowerPoint.
Okay. Are we good? Do you see a very long quote that nobody wants to read? Okay, well, I'm going to summarize it anyway. You don't have to read it. This is a story, though, I feel like for teachers, this is a really neat piece that fits into our story very well and is relatable to students. This is an essay that was written by a high school student in 1944, and it is regarding the Marian Anderson, at least this piece of it is regarding the Marian Anderson concert. And it's talking about how, look at this, the Marian Anderson was barred from singing in Constitution Hall, ironically, enough by the professional daughters of the very men who founded this nation for liberty and equality. But hey, look, she gets to sing, and she's this huge crowd. And then you get down to the bottom. That was a touching tribute, but Miss Anderson may not as yet spend the night in any good hotel in America. And so that night, after she gave this amazing performance at the Lincoln on Easter Sunday of 1939, she is not allowed to stay in a hotel in Washington, D.C., just to stay with friends. And I just love this because it's another great example of a primary source, but it puts us in the mind of a high school student in 1944. And so this student will end up winning an essay contest that he wrote this for. And he and his teacher will get on a bus. They are in Atlanta. They're going to go to another school to present this essay. And either on the way or on the way back, they're asked to move to the back. And so, that whole story that we try to, that we tell about what the situation was like for African Americans in the South in this time period really plays out right here with this story. And what makes this just all so much more fitting is, by now, I'm sure you know exactly who I'm talking about, in 1944, who was a high school student growing up in Atlanta. It's going to be the same person who gets to share the same spot with Miss Marian on the very steps at the Lincoln Memorial. And so just the idea that as a high school student, and by the way, he skipped a couple of grades. So Martin Luther King is a high school student at some ridiculously young age, and he writes this essay, and then this, the incident on the bus. And, I don't by any means say that because of that, that's why he became who he became, but these things have to add up. And so it's a great connection for us to make, that here he is writing about Miss Marian Anderson's concert. So he knows that this has happened. He knows that it happened at the Lincoln, and here he is. This happens to be 1957. The first time he comes and gives a speech at the Lincoln Memorial. This is called the Prayer Pilgrimage for Freedom. And his speech that he's giving is is known as the give him the ballot speech, because he's talking about voting rights. And he's talking about how just a few years after the Brown v. Board decision, that we still weren't getting schools integrated. And he would come to Washington on a couple of occasions to fight for the integration of schools as well. But his most famous visit to Washington is ultimately this, the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I don't think I go to any school that I don't show a picture like this, because I, of course, want to make sure the students all see the park rangers in the picture. I make a really big deal about that. I'm usually very happy when they don't ask me if that's me. I have been asked on multiple occasions if either one of those guys is me, and I have to let them know I wasn't quite born yet. But it is a great way to connect what we do and to talk about how, you know, as park rangers, we have this opportunity to be there when historic things are happening. And so love to talk about this event. I really make a big deal telling kids that when they come to the Lincoln Memorial, they get to be in a place where history happened, and you're putting your feet. I was out there this morning telling students that you can, you know, put your feet right where he stood. And one of the best questions I ever got, well, there's one question I got that I've never been able to answer, but one kid, I was in a classroom years ago, and little boys, I had little guys, they were probably kindergarten or first grade, kids rolling around on the ground, and I was convinced he wasn't listening to anything I was saying. And out of nowhere, he just started asked a question, and he says, so if I stand where Dr. King stood, will my dreams come true? And there are just these moments where you're like, wow, where did they come up with this stuff? That was really amazing. The question that stumped me more than any other was when a second grader asked me on the steps at Lincoln, this was years ago, he said, if we had an Abraham Lincoln, why did we need a Dr. King? And yeah, I'm still working on my answer for that one. It was amazing. So I'm going to get caught up in all of this. This is a view just to give you an idea of what the crowd was like on the day of the March on Washington. They estimate 250,000 people were there that day. Hot. It was August. People were probably in the pool. We don't recommend that today. It's actually being drained right now and it's pretty near empty, but yeah, momentous day. I mean, this changes the whole story of the National Mall, because now this is being a place that's recognized as a place. It's not just about unity. It's a place that represents freedom to so many people. I mean, why is A. Philip Randolph want to have all of these marches and things here? This is the, you know, a destination where people want to be. Another one of my favorite stories to tell is about this gal, Miss Edith. And I feel like this works well for students as well, because the thing I like to do is just ask about her expression on her face. And, you know, what do you think? What do you think she's thinking about? And, you know, does she look happy? Is she serious? Yesterday, I was with first graders and I showed them this picture and I said, what do you think she's thinking about? And this little first grader said to me, equality. And I was like, wow, you know, just, you never know what you're going to get. And so using these kind of primary sources maybe helps us tell some of these stories. So very quickly, Miss Edith was here in Washington, D.C. visiting a relative on her 12th birthday. The March on Washington occurred on her 12th birthday. And she wanted to come because she had heard Martin Luther King speak in Detroit, where she was from. And she had heard his speech and she said, I want to go hear him again. And so they would, she and her mom would come down, and you can tell she's squished up against a fence. I think if you're looking at the Lincoln from the reflecting pool, she's off on the right side. And yeah, I mean, amazing story. She said this was an influential, life-changing moment. She knew that this is what she wanted to do. She wanted to fight for equality like Dr. King, and she made a life of it. She spent a lot of her time, you know, working in educating and in fighting for civil rights. I talked to her a few months ago. I guess it just maybe a little over just soon after the presidential election, we actually talked. And she said she had been out counting ballots. I mean, so she's still very civically minded and very involved in things like that. The thing that's amazing about this story is she did not know this photograph was taken of her that day. So this is 1963. She was 12. She finds this photo in 2008. So she's in her 40s. She doesn't know that this picture had been taken. And she then tracks down the photographer and is able to, kind of go around and spend a lot of time, talking about this and using this as an occasion to tell her story. We've had her come to Washington when she's been here. She's talked to student groups we've had. And on one occasion, she brought that pennant that she's holding on to. She still has it. And she decided it was worthy of being seen by more people. And so she decided to donate it to the African American History and Culture Museum. So if you go and you visit, you go see Miss Marion's dress, you can go see Miss Edith's pennant. And her house even had a fire at one point, so it looks a little scorched, and she's amazed that it survived. And so check that out if you're local and able to go see the museum. So we use this photo in our Martin Luther King Memorial brochure, and she reached out to us when she saw it, and she has become like a friend of the parks, comes to visit us on occasion. And when I show this and share this with students, they always want to know about her and is she still alive. And so I like to show pictures of us together standing at Dr. King's memorial. It would have been her birthday, one of the last years probably before the pandemic. But yeah, I think she looks exactly the same, doesn't she? As she did when she was, anyway. Miss Edith, real sweetheart. And one of our premier things that we do in honor of the I Have a Dream speech in the March on Washington, we've worked with the same school in DC for over, 17 years now, maybe. It's been, it was virtual last year. I hope they're coming out again. I haven't confirmed a date yet, but I sure hope they'll be back out. But having students use that spot as a place to recite the speech. And so this one particular school comes out and every student gets a few words. And so they all come together and say their part. And it's just amazing to hear, these big words and these big ideas from such young voices. And you could probably Google this and, I Have a Dream kids doing the speech at Lincoln and find years past, every year's the parents like put it on YouTube. So you can find it. And it's really, I've seen it every time and I still get kind of choked up to watch it. It's a pretty momentous occasion. And to me, this is one of the best examples we have of working with a teacher. This was the idea of a local teacher who I met at a workshop we hosted, and the idea was she came to me with this and I described some things we could do and she came up with this plan, and it's become like this tradition. I've had a parent from this school say this is one of the reasons we put our kid in this school was so that he would have the chance to do this. So it's really memorable. And this is the kind of stuff that we like to do. If you have an idea and, I always say that, what you study and what you teach, and I know what our park resources are. It's just a matter of us coming together and finding that connection in that right spot. So I do encourage you, if you have ideas and thoughts of letting us know what we can do to help make them happen, because this has become an amazing tradition that would not have happened without this one particular teacher setting it up and leading to other groups doing it. I mean, anybody calls and we'll set this up and make it happen. Put this in here because I don't know if I have language arts folks in the group here tonight, but John Lewis giving his speech at the Lincoln Memorial as part of the March on Washington may be familiar with his story in that he was the youngest of the speakers and he came with a very powerful speech. Very reminiscent of Dr. Robert Moton, who came to the dedication and wanted to really be very much more forceful in what he wanted to say as far as the civil rights thing was going. And John Lewis was calmed down and told that he had to kind of tweak his speech a little, or there were people who were not going to participate in the march with him. And so if you're looking for a kind of speeches and comparisons, looking at the befores and the afters, you can find for Moton and for John Lewis, you can see the different versions and the things that they did. So that might be something worth considering as far as how speeches are done and just the whole idea of censorship and others telling someone else what to say when we think of the National Mall as this place of demonstrations and protests, and yet these people didn't always get to say exactly what they wanted to say in the name of the cause. I don't know, it just seems like a really fascinating situation. So this was 1963. I'm jumping ahead a little to 1968. Resurrection City, the Poor People's Campaign, was this village that was set up. This was Dr. King's last big dream of demonstrating to Washington and maybe the nation that people were suffering through poverty, and he wanted to bring that close by to Washington, D.C. And so before he went off to Memphis, he was very hard at work on this Poor People's Campaign. And when he was assassinated in Memphis in April of 68, they decided to carry on this Poor People's Campaign, this idea of kind of building this little town almost along the south side of the reflecting pool. And who knew it was going to rain so much and that they would have that situation to deal with. And they would also be suffering the loss of Dr. King's leadership. And his successors just didn't have the same pull that he had. And so this didn't exactly work out the way it was supposed to, didn't exactly convey the message maybe it would have in different conditions. But it did, make aware of the situation, that poverty was definitely a problem. And here is Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, coming to the Lincoln Memorial as part of what they called Solidarity Day. I believe it was June of 68, but there she is now standing on the steps at the Lincoln Memorial. So we have all of these events are happening, and look at the crowd. She's got a pretty nice crowd there. So this has now become a place where people are coming to give programs and presentations and share their ideas. And we see this really happening a lot. This is 68. So 1970, President Nixon. And I was gonna just leave you this link. And Aaron and I were just talking before I got started. And I was like, let me play this for you. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and just show you a little bit because this is pretty nutty. And I think I might just let President Nixon describe it for himself. Hopefully I can figure out how to do this. So it's 1970, and the Kent State situation has just occurred where protests are breaking out and a few students have been killed at Kent State. Am I good? Can you all see this? Yeah.
Yep.
So there was a huge demonstration.
Can you hear it?
Both those events. At that time, I was living in Detroit, Michigan. I went with two women. We drove all night to Washington, arrived 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And at that time, you could drive right in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And we did so. And as we pulled up, there was a limousine parked there. And we went, what's going on?
This is a memory of what actually took place at the Lincoln Memorial. As you recall, the press conference was at 10 o'clock Friday night. I then went to bed, slept soundly until shortly after 4 o'clock. When I woke up, I got up and went into the sitting room. A Rachmaninoff number. Manila apparently heard that came down to the Lincoln sitting room. Then I looked out at the window and together. I asked him if he had ever been to the Lincoln Memorial at night. He said he had not. I said, get your clothes on, I'm going to go down to the Lincoln Memorial. I had never seen the Secret Service quite so petrified with that bridge.
It just got, as I recall, there may have been some altered consciousness involved on the trip on the way there.
On your half.
On our half. And we went up to the top of the Lincoln Memorial. There were probably 30 or 40 people there, crowded around, and President Nixon was out there.
I walked over to a group of them. Walked up to them. They were not friendly. In fact, they were somewhat overawed. And of course, quite surprised. I said, I know probably most of you think I'm an SOB. Just how you feel. How excited I was when the chairman came home from getting a famous statement began to climb up over the Washington Monument. And I said I had to go, shook hands. Walked down the steps. So followed from Detroit, was taking this picture as I began to get come. I was thinking he wouldn't like to get out of the picture. He stepped over with me and I stepped out as the president stopped to take the picture.
And he took a picture of the two of us. Unfortunately, didn't focus the camera. And at that time, you know, I hadn't shaved or cut my beard for 3 or 4 years. I was pretty wild and woolly.
Quite delighted. That brought a smile that I could see before I was.
See, that probably is an indication of our preparation for the visit, not the visit itself. There was this part of me that was going, now's your big chance. Say something that makes them see everything, you know? And then there was this other part of me that was very intimidated by the power and office of the presidency as it was manifesting, even at that hour of the morning.
I'm going to stop it there, but I will be happy to share the link so that you all can watch the rest of this. So 4 o'clock in the morning, President Nixon decides to make a visit to the Lincoln Memorial, maybe one of the more unusual episodes from our memorial story. Oh, here I am. So anyway, that just kind of cracked me up. So this is 1970. Obviously, things are nutty with Vietnam happening and how crazy the situation is. These were the two women. If you continue in that video, I guess he talks about the two ladies that he came with. The bearded guy, and Nixon apparently talked to them about, you know, it's okay if you're not married yet, don't worry about it, my daughters aren't married yet. I mean, it's really amazing stuff, but just this whole idea that you could run into the president in the midst of, you know, wartime, and at 4 in the morning you probably don't expect to see the president at the Lincoln Memorial. It's often described as just a really strange incident. And to have Nixon now, the declassified tapes, and to be able to hear the whole story from his perspective anyway is pretty neat. So if anyone's interested, I'm happy to you know, send along a follow up with some of the links in here if you want to follow up on some more of this. So just kind of moving through time a little bit. I never thought I would still be talking like this. So just a few other things I wanted to share, but you know, how do you compile 100 years worth of events into, you know, an hour? But here's 1970 in June. This is a big group who are gathering for a Juneteenth rally. And then this one on the right surprises me that the crowds gathered on the Lincoln Steps on a vigil after the death of John Lennon. I mean, who knew? In 1980, he was killed in New York, but here they are. So you know, this has become a place that all kinds of groups are gathering for all kinds of reasons. And certainly we could go through the 70s, 80s, 90s. But I'm jumping you to the last night of 1999. At this point now, I'm on the mall. And as Aaron and I were talking earlier, I'm like, wow, I've got over 20 years. That means like I'm talking about a fifth of the memorial's history that like I've been around for. That's kind of scary. But I remember the last night of 1999, we were all a little freaked out by that whole Y2K thing. And somehow I ended up working. I didn't usually work the night shift. And I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be awful. I don't want to do this. And I complained as I always do. And then I ended up having a really great time. We had a lot of fun that night. And I wasn't so thrilled about the idea of launching fireworks off of a newly renovated Washington Monument, but it was a really fun night. It wasn't that cold. I got to, you know, hang out with my buddies. We were, I was assigned, this is kind of funny. I was assigned to work the VIP parking lot. And about the time I got to the VIP parking lot, the roads around downtown were closed off because this was a presidential event. So it always made me laugh about that assignment because I wondered who was going to be driving in when all the roads were closed. So I kind of had free reign. I got to kind of wander around and help in other locations. And once the president ended, and I did find, if you're interested in this show, the Clinton Library has it on YouTube, an hour and a half of the celebrities. Ironically enough, in these times, Will Smith was the host of this event. And one of the things that I most remember was after all the, the president and the first lady and all the invited guests got to step away from the stage that had been built in front of Lincoln, they let us go up. And I remember watching Bono from U2 perform. And so that was a pretty neat moment. So this is New Year's Eve, 1999. Just thinking back about some of the other kinds of things that happen. So every year Lincoln's birthday is commemorated with some sort of a wreath laying, and we got really carried away apparently this year where, well, I guess every year we do, but lots and lots of wreaths, but lots of presidents have made an appearance. So Gerald Ford in 75, there's FDR in 1940, Reagan in 1981. So birthdays every February 12th is a tradition at the Lincoln Memorial. That's pretty big. Lately, it's been inaugurations. And so I've been at some of these, not all of them, not at most of these events, but I at least remember, interesting, George W. and Ricky Martin. How about it? Obama's, Trump's, Biden's, Bush 41. So everyone's using Lincoln. And, it's interesting as we talk about this evolution of the meaning of the memorial and the idea that it's, not so much about unity, it's about freedom and it's about emancipation. When we look at this collage of photos, though, we see it doesn't really matter. We're at probably our least united for quite some time here, and yet everybody, kind of bonds up around Lincoln. We're all kind of, it doesn't matter what party you're a part of, and we all recognize, the symbolism of Lincoln, and everyone wants to be a part of it. And so maybe that unity theme isn't as outdated as I argue it could be. So just kind of neat to see this. Okay, I'm going to show this really fast, but I was fascinated by this photo. I talked to you about Resurrection City, the 1968 event that happened. And one of the things that has struck me is just sort of this idea of we need to bring people to the Lincoln Memorial after they're gone. And so John Lewis, in fact, two of our rangers, two of our managers are out here saluting. I remember watching this thinking, I know them. But John Lewis, the idea that you would want to bring his motorcade past the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept. Like, why is this an important thing to do? Bob Dole, they brought him by World War II. Picture on the left is of the era of Resurrection City, June of '68, and that's the body of Robert Kennedy. And it's just a crazy story of what happens to him. He's assassinated in Los Angeles. His funeral is in New York, and then they bring him by train down to Washington, and it gets delayed along the route. And so it ends up being nighttime, and it happens to be that they bury him. I think I'm pretty sure I just read this, that it was the only nighttime funeral at Arlington, because that's when he finally arrived. And before they go to Arlington, just across the river from us at the Lincoln, they go through the area known as, right by all the people who are part of Resurrection City, the Poor People's Campaign. And so that image just really, this whole idea of why is it so important to us to have people who have passed go by a place like this. I don't know if you all have an answer or a thought, but I just found this to be a really interesting concept. But let's, kind of end it on a little bit more of a upbeat note here. This is a place that pop culture has really gotten into. And if this is a topic that appeals to you, one of our colleagues is going to do a program in mid-May, I believe at the Sylvan Theater, where he talks about the Lincoln Memorial in popular culture. And this is just an example of one of my days when early on as a young ranger, I'm working the Lincoln Memorial. I, of course, had no idea this was happening. You see it's been all roped off. There's lights and all kinds of things happening. And it turns out they were filming National Treasure. So probably means nothing to the kids that I talked to today, but I thought maybe teachers would have some concept of National Treasure. Here's Nicolas Cage and his little buddy sitting on the steps. They literally filmed this all day. And for a scene that is in the movie, it's 2 seconds. I think they just flash to it. They're sitting on the step and then it's over. And I had to laugh because I watched them all day long film this. The funniest part, though, is that they brought these guys in to be actors. These are actor park rangers. And I mean, I was standing out there all day. I could have been the actor who got cut because they don't appear in the movie. But at one point in the day, they came to us and they're like, so could you tell us where are the bathrooms? because the the park ranger actors kept getting asked all the rate. I mean, look at him. He's talking to more people probably than I am. I'm taking pictures. So just really interesting, just an example. I mean, we've had so many things filmed there, so many of, you know, famous people come all the time. I'm pretty sure I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger just out visiting in the memorial one day. So you just never know what a day is going to bring. And when we think of all of like these big events and we think of just kind of the everyday being out there, and it's kind of where I wanted to end it all by saying that yes, while we think about these big events and while we think about the meaning that has changed over time, I think we also have to remember just that this is a place, that this is the most visited site on the mall, and this is where everybody wants to come, and everybody brings their own meaning to it. And I don't know that I'm going to say this the way I wanted to, but the idea that it's the personal experience that we all have when we come here. And I remember on days when I was stationed out here for long periods of time, and I was complaining about my feet hurting and just how awful it was. I found that the one thing I could do to kind of lighten my mood and make me feel a little better was to stand near the top up here and watch people as they approached the top step and saw Lincoln for the first time. And you could just see their eyes like pop open. And you just got this sense that, wow, they're really, you know, I've seen this a zillion times. It may not be that exciting to me, but to see it through other people's eyes was really fun. And so that's what I try to hold on to, even when I complain about having to go up those steps. Back in the day, in the early 1980s, I bet I had a much easier time of it, as evidenced by this photo. That's me on my first visit to the Lincoln Memorial, which still, yeah, kind of surprising to think that I spend so much time there now when here I am as a kid. It's my little brother who now towers over me. So I love this photo to remind myself that I once was taller. So big events and the everyday visitor. I feel like there's so much to tell here, and I hope I've given a little flavor. At least I'm probably running out of time. Oh yeah, but just a little flavor of some of the things that have happened at the Lincoln over time, and I hope maybe this has inspired y'all to want to come out and join us for some events if you're local. We have a whole calendar on the Lincoln Memorial webpage with all the programs. Ranger programs are going to be happening and all sorts of different events. We're going to have a family day on May 14th for kids, hands-on activities out around the Lincoln Memorial. There'll be another dedication being done by the Lincoln group of DC, and other things happening. So check out our calendar and please connect with us if you are interested in us, you know, helping you with any kind of projects related to Lincoln or any of our sites on the mall. Anybody have any comments, questions? Thank you for that, Erin. Hi, Sheila. Nice to see you. Sort of. Okay, are we done looking at this picture? Thank you all so much. And yeah, if you've missed any of our sessions, please check back and feel free to contact us if you want to do any kind of programs. Oh, Erin, we have another program, don't we?
Yes, thank you. Great reminder.
So we did this session 6 weeks of different programs for teachers. We decided we should really do something for students as well. So we have a scheduled Zoom on May 9th, 1 o'clock Eastern, that you can join with your students. And we're happy to do, maybe not as you know, into all of this, but a little bit about the building, the symbolism, and some of the events, some of the big events. So if you are looking to do something with your students, yeah, please join us. Let us know if there's anything else we can do. Oh, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jen, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and hope you found some great ways to bring the Lincoln Memorial back to your classroom from this session and from our other 5. So be sure to check them out online, and maybe we'll see you at our virtual field trip in May. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.